Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. I am honored to share some time with two incredible people who embody the life and beauty of the gospel. And so I'm here with Natalie Rainey and Kayla Bain. Natalie was born and raised in the Carolinas, graduated from the University of South Carolina in 1988.
Go Cox.
There you go. Moved to South Florida to pursue a career with AT&T, and then ended up back in Tampa in 1991. Married to Steve Raney in 94 and had two boys that ultimately you ended up retiring, giving your life to community service and volunteer groups, and ultimately to South Tampa's Community Bible Study, which is a part of an international Bible study based in Colorado Springs. For the last 8 years, Natalie and her husband Steve have been involved in foster care as respite care for foster families needing a break. And then Natalie was the expansion coordinator along with her sister Lisa Turner for the Isaiah 117 house here in Hillsborough County in 2023, and now a volunteer supporting Kayla Bain as the location leader for the Hillsborough County house. Kayla has served as the location leader for Isaiah 117 house here in Hillsborough County, born and raised in Tampa, and then went away to college up at UF, which
Go Gators.
Go Gators. Yeah, there's a friendly competition always. And after getting a bachelor's degree in public relations, you went on to get a master's in management and then became the location leader for Hillsborough County. Your involvement in nonprofit work really began when you founded an organization helping kids participate in art, and we'll get into that more and more. But Kayla has been the location leader since October of 2023 here in Hillsborough County. So Natalie, Kayla, thank you for sharing time with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we have Carolina schools and UF is school. That's all the conversation at our house now because I've got a daughter
on your road
aiming.
trips.
Yep. So we're carving out time. Natalie, we've known you for a while, and I've seen the impact of your life here in South Tampa, broadly in the community, but then personally with my wife and our family. So it's been a joy to know you. Kayla, I just met you today, but I've heard through a secret source extraordinary things. I won't name my source, but my source says that you're pretty extraordinary. So we've seen that. We're going to talk about foster care, the Isaiah 117 house, the impact that you all are having. And my hope was really, we always say we want to tell stories about people whose lives and work embody the life and beauty of the gospel, and really through your stories see through to this bigger story of what God is doing in the world. And our audience, everybody who's been a part of this story, we've heard from people who are involved in criminal justice ministries, academic work, beauty, and the arts. And today, all of those themes are going to kind of collide as we talk about foster care and providing a home in a really incredibly urgent moment for kids and some of the most vulnerable kids. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, because we're going to be talking about home, take me back to the Carolinas. And I'm curious, Natalie, are you surprised that you ended up in Tampa and stayed? Were you always somebody who thought you would live forever in the Carolinas? Or when you came to Florida to go to pursue that first career with AT&T, did you have a sense like, I'm going to stay?
Well, if you know anything about Florence, South Carolina,
I don't.
You would know that I wanted the heck out.
You were ready to go.
However, it's funny how life is, and just bringing, as we get older and, life happens, just like you said before, just relationships, how relationships are formed and things come full circle. So I love the Carolinas. It's a part of my life. I'm still in touch with my college roommates, my best friend from high school. I have all those relationships. But when I moved to Tampa in 91, my dad actually said to me, Natalie, if you better like Tampa, because if you plan on marrying Steve Raney, he's not going anywhere. And he was right. Steve's not going anywhere. Steve loves this city, loves the people here, and I have grown to love the same.
Yeah.
So we're here to stay.
Yeah, it was good to hear from a friend level. And I love that about Steve and his impact in the community as well, and just being a part of a city. we're having that conversation with our daughters as they think about colleges. We're like, wherever you
Mhm.
send them, the likelihood that they're going to stay, they may
Mhm.
fall in love with it. Are you surprised that you came back? Well, like when you went to
Mhm.
UF, were you thinking that's going to be a launching pad to somewhere else in the world?
Yeah, I originally feel like I left Tampa and went to Florida, and my senior year was COVID. And I was like, what am I going to do? I originally thought I would move to Nashville. I started applying for jobs in Nashville, and nothing was just working out. And I felt like every time I applied somewhere or tried to think of what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go, I felt like all roads were kind of just like leading back towards Tampa. And so I ended up moving back here, and I can say it's the best decision that I decided to make.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary
Mm-hmm.
city. I'll boast on Tampa really
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and this will come back to Isaiah
Mm-hmm.
117 and what I'm so proud of, not just the people in our
Mm-hmm.
city and in our county that are embracing this work, but it's a special place. I think coming from the Pacific Northwest, we knew some of the what
Mm-hmm.
I would say are the most incredible pioneering spirit, but generous people, faithful people. And when we got to Tampa, we met that just continued, and we've
Yeah.
met some of the most incredible
Mm-hmm.
people in Tampa. And so it's not a surprise that the community really rallied behind the work.
Yeah, and I feel like a testament to that, just being able to grow up in Tampa and watch it grow over time. Even when I went off to college in 2016 and coming back after 2021, the city itself, I feel like has changed so much. And I feel like it's for the good too. And I feel like just to that point of community, that community here in Tampa is so rich specifically. And especially specifically the Christian community and the church community, I feel like has just grown tremendously over the past few years too.
Has it always been like that a little bit though, Natalie? You've been here for a while, and it's
Mhm.
special for all of us. You grew up here, but for
Mhm.
me coming in, I was like, wow, this is really special. Has it always been
Mhm.
like that?
I do believe Tampa is that kind of special place.
Mhm.
People here, there's so many ways to explore faith
Mhm.
and just having a city that's, like Kayla used the word rich in so many different ways.
Mhm.
So I would say rich in faith and really extremely wealthy and generous.
Yeah.
That's what I have found. And I'm sure this will come out in our conversation, but just the radical generosity of this community is what has really propelled many nonprofits, many new
Mhm.
nonprofits, including
Yeah.
your own ministry.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
really special place in that way.
Yeah, the impact from Tampa, I feel like, is being felt around the world.
Mm.
And there's a stewardship story that probably needs to be told. Maybe Steve can come and talk about that one. But
Yes.
we're going to talk about a house. But to get into this, everybody listening, I want you to imagine your childhood home. And all of us have had different experiences. Some have been really tragic and heartbreaking. And for us, when we think about our childhood home, maybe we don't even have memories because those have been blocked out for us, or it's really painful to go back to that time. For some of us, it was the sweetest moment of our life, and we can go back to a place and we remember the sweetest place that we grew up. And just, I want you to imagine like your childhood home if you're listening, because we're going to come full circle to really the power of place and the power of people who love you lavishly in that
Mm.
place. And so I want to ask you to do that exercise, to take us back like childhood home.
Mm.
There's a spot in everybody's childhood home, I think, where you maybe not everybody had that experience, but for those of us who had the privilege of being in a home where we felt safe and secure, there was a particular spot in that home that was ours. We loved that spot. And so
Mm.
for some of us, it was like a window seat, in the house that had those where the sun would shine in and you could read a book right there as the warmth of the sun. Others, it was a tree in the backyard. Did you have a place like that in your childhood home?
Mm. Yeah, I would say mine, my family and I, we were blessed. We live on a lake, and I feel like living on the water is just something that's so peaceful. And I love being outside, being in nature and the Lord's creation. And we have a little like back porch. And we always just had like, like a little outdoor couch out there. So I think that was just my spot growing up. I always loved just hearing the nature and the water, even if it was like raining and we were sitting on the porch, and it was just such a cool thing where you're like, you're in the rain, but you're not in the rain because you're covered from the rain.
Yeah.
But just being right there on the porch, being outside, my family and I still spend a lot of time on the porch together, just hanging out, whether it's eating or talking.
That's all. Florida, if you've never experienced a Florida rain, I fell in love with Florida rains like that afternoon. It's coming right now this season.
We're in that
but
season.
when you can be outside and it's just warm and raining and there's something beautiful. I would be scared of a lake. I could do the bay, but I'm still timid about alligators. So, did you ever see one growing up?
I did not.
Okay.
I know. I claim that there's no alligators on this lake. I'm sure there are, as my mother would say. There are probably alligators, but I've never seen one.
You're whatever you did in the backyard.
Maybe I was just oblivious to it.
There you go. There you go. Did you have a spot back in did you have a spot like that, or was home not like that for you?
No, I feel like my first 13 years of my childhood were really idyllic. I have the best memories of my first 13 years, and that was in Raleigh, North Carolina. And a lot outside. My first home was in a neighborhood where our babysitter, Gigi, I remember her, a beautiful young girl that babysat for us right down the street, and then Lakemont Country Club, where it was just sort of like a neighborhood pool. And that's where I took on my swim lessons, and I was able to ride my bike by myself with my bathing suit, my towel wrapped around my shoulders, playing with my sisters in the den, just more memories, and a lot of memories of freedom.
Yeah.
A lot of freedom then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's changed. It feels like that. Probably everybody says that, but I remember that we used to get on our bikes, and that was that freedom. You would just go and you would go into the neighborhood and come and go out of your house. But yeah, I was fortunate to have parents who provided a home that was safe and secure. And there's a lot of research, a lot of data that says that later in life, you'll be brave enough to go to UF. You'll be brave enough to go take a job in South Florida when you've had that base of security that has allowed you to know I'm bonded, I'm secure, I'm safe, and I can take risks now to travel out and try some stuff. And that's such a privilege for us who have had that. Not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And not everybody can even rely on having a predictable place to go. So you contrast that with our experience and the way it feels to have that safe place that we can go back to and go, I remember it. I got chills remembering where I used to hang out on the back porch listening to the rain. And on the other side, you have kids who it's so unpredictable, and there's a question mark of, do I have a place?
Yeah.
And that's really at the core, there's trauma around that question and the vulnerability there. That's what Isaiah 117 is addressing. Kayla, can you give us just a 100,000 foot view of the organization? It's national. So the national organization, what's the problem that's facing them that they're trying to solve? And then locally, give us a glimpse of Isaiah 117 in Hillsborough County.
So from the broader kind of that 30,000 level view, it was founded in a small town in Tennessee by two people named Rhonda and Corey Paulson. And they had been going through foster care classes, and they got to that class where they would go to the department, and the guy was like, this is where the kids come when they're removed. And it kind of stirred in her heart, like, what do you mean they come here when they're removed? And he responded to her that a little girl had slept there on the floor last night. And so that's where that initial Isaiah 117 house seed was planted, really. It was in her heart right then and there. And that kind of stirred up the question of what if there was a home for these kids? Specifically, that gap that we're serving is removal day. And so currently when a child's removed from their home, by a caseworker and law enforcement, they're waiting in offices for that foster care placement. No food, typically, no showers. They're just sitting there waiting while that caseworker tries to find them that foster care placement. So initially boiling down, our mission is to reduce the trauma on the child of their removal day, of that gap, and then lighten that load of the caseworker. And then thirdly, ease that transition for a foster family. And so that's kind of that question of answering what if there was a home to fulfill all three of those mission statements for children in our county.
Yeah. It's when you describe that moment of removal day, even just having a name to a
Yeah.
day that's removal day. I think everybody listening, some of us have been through it. Some of us, that's our story. Some of us, we know somebody personally that has gone through that. And there's trauma on all sides of that story, even for the caseworker,
Yeah.
right? That's having to be there. And that's what struck me about the power of a place and this particular like gap that there's a need, not just to fill like a practical need, but there's a really vulnerable moment right there when a kid doesn't know what's happened to them or what's about to happen to them. And you all are stepping right into that. And we'll pull on that and get a better, a deeper view of that. But Natalie, how did you get involved with Isaiah 117?
About a decade ago, Steve and I were exposed to the foster care system through my sister Lisa and Mark Turner. They were licensed to foster care and began having children live with them in their home. And Steve and I had agreed to be the respite care. So we had children living in our home and were able to see firsthand, the joy of having a young child in your home, and also their hardest moments. They're really, really hard times. We're exposed every single day. We're talking about little broken hearts. And Rhonda says this all the time when she shares with groups. Most people think, yay, removal day. Let's get those kids out of that dangerous situation and into Zach and Cammie Elliott's home where it's safe and cozy and their siblings. But from the child's perspective, what Steve and I have seen and what we found through our experience is that the child is nowhere near yay removal day. They are completely distressed and traumatized over being removed from their mother, father, grandmother, whoever they were living with. And what, like Kayla had said, what our goal is that we Isaiah 117 House is not here to solve the child care crisis. We're here to step in to say, hey, we see you, we care about you, we love you, and we're here for you. You're not alone on their worst day.
Yeah. I think there's a beautiful story. It's like a folk fable associated with the Trail of Tears that talks about as the mothers would walk up out of Georgia on the Trail of Tears, that everywhere a child died, the tears of the moms would water the ground and the Georgia rose would bud up from that place. But it always struck me because there's these really tender spaces where tragedy or trauma is happening. And there's, in theological terms, there's kenosis and theosis. Anywhere there's that brokenness and that death experience, there's an opportunity for the love of God to intersect right there, and life appears in these really, really difficult places. And that's where the brilliance of the gospel really impacts us, when we go, even here, right? Even here. And so I think that's, for me, when I say you all embody the life and beauty of the gospel in Isaiah 117, is drawing a circle particularly and kind of freezing the frame right there and saying, we can't address this whole thing, right? All of us have to pray and work on behalf of these most vulnerable people and all of the downstream tragedies associated with what's leading to removal day.
Right.
And there's this moment where this child is being brought from a place that they've known. And even if it's a really bad circumstance or difficult circumstance, it's still what they know.
That's right.
They're being brought here. And there was this gap that existed. And this is what Rhonda highlighted. I got to hear her speak. And she said, right there is this gap. And caught in that gap is that child.
That's right.
Why did that gap exist? Like, I'll throw that as like an all play. But why for so long had that gap existed? And what's that friction point that causes that gap?
That's a great question, Zach. I think I'm putting myself in the shoes of the Department of Children and Families. Their job is so big and so hard and so demanding. And so from their perspective and ours, they've done a fabulous job at serving. We'll get specific to Hillsborough County. Hillsborough County has the most children in child welfare than any other county in the state of Florida. There's over 2,700 kids in the foster care system. And these case managers are frontline workers. And they've done a wonderful job with what they've been given to serve these kids, care for these kids, keep them safe until they're placed. What Kayla highlighted was Rhonda and Corey Paulson are in their foster care training thinking to themselves, this is the best there is, that a child slept on this floor. We can do better. And so that's really how Lisa, my sister and I, Lisa Turner and I, got involved, was after seeing these real children in our homes day in and day out, after seeing what they went through on their removal day, and then going back to, is this how it has to be? DCF has done a fabulous job. Our children's network as a whole, these are incredible caseworkers, case managers that Kayla and I have met and worked with and have bonded with. But can we do better? Yeah. Can we come alongside and partner with the state and make this even better, just enhancing what's already going on? So that's how Lisa and I decided, you know what, let's pursue Isaiah 117 House. It already exists. Rhonda and Corey are doing a great job. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We can bring this into Hillsborough County and partner with the state. And Kayla had referenced that Danae Bunzo, our state director for Isaiah 117, already had those relationships developed with the state out of Tallahassee. Siobhan Harris, the secretary for the Department of Children and Families, and Brian McDuffie, these key players who have blessed Isaiah 117 House for our state and for our county. So that's how it all came to be.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, like the department is, doing their job. They're doing their best. Caseworkers are such a high turnover rate, and part of our mission is loving on those caseworkers and lavishly loving on them, showing them that they're not alone too in this process. And I think it kind of segues into our verse, which is Isaiah 117, and it says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, defend the cause of the orphan, and plead for the case of the widow." And so I feel like Christians in the church are coming alongside the department. And as the church, we're all believers of Christ, and that's our job. The Bible's commanding us to that. Our Bible's commanding us to defend the cause of the orphan. And so the state's kind of doing their job. And I feel like Isaiah 117's job is to be the church, to be the body, to be Jesus, to come alongside them and defend that cause for the orphan.
Yeah. I love that you even framed it in with Isaiah 117, the idea that God even has orchestrated and ordered the world with governmental authority, and there is right and proper governmental authority that has the authority and the responsibility to remove kids.
Yes.
And that's a weighty thing and a serious thing. And that's why we need great people in those spaces. And it's a difficult job. I have a brother who works in child welfare on the West Coast, and that's a difficult calling and vocation. And that's what that's why I say I see so much of the life and beauty of the gospel in Isaiah 117, because you are not saying we're going to Christianize this or somehow do something in addition or reinvent the wheel, but looking at all of these different partners who are working on behalf of these really vulnerable kids. And you're saying there's one gap right there, and we can step into that, and we can bring beauty, we can bring life, we can bring safety to kids right in that space. That's what excited me and got me thinking, okay, A, this is a great story to tell, but B, when we think about stewarding resources and where we put resources to catalyze really impactful things, I see what you all are doing and say, absolutely. Like, this is an example of an incredible collaboration between the public sector and nonprofits and faith-based organizations to say, let's work together, shoulder to shoulder. We'll take this little moment and we'll focus on that so that you can focus on your job.
Yes, right.
We're going to reduce trauma.
Right.
We're going to increase the care for the people who are doing that really difficult work. And then as families come in, we're going to make it easier for them to access.
Yeah.
Kayla, talk a little bit about, now that we kind of have a picture around what is happening, right? Talk about removal day And what you guys are building a house here in Hillsborough County that will then meet that need, so that we're not sleeping in an office or spending 14 hours in a waiting room. You're providing a place. Tell us a little bit about removal day itself. What happens for kids? And then what is the house going to provide specifically?
Yeah. So currently on removal day, when a child's removed, they're removed from everything they've known. Most times caseworkers and law enforcement are going in. A lot of kids show up to families with just a trash bag of what they could grab walking out the door. And they're taken right now to the CPI office, and they're waiting in that playroom for placement whenever that comes available. And so what a home will provide is the Isaiah 117 house. It's a white house with black roof and a red door. All houses kind of look the same around the nation, but basically when a child walks through that door, there's going to be volunteers and staff there to greet them. Like, what's your favorite meal? Like, how can we serve you and make that child feel so loved and known, while allowing that caseworker to actually do their job of finding them placement. So the way the house is kind of structured, it'll have like a 2-bedroom. It'll look like you're walking into a typical house, but it'll have an office specifically designed for that caseworker. It'll have floor to ceiling glass, and they can do their work, but while still having eyes on the child, while we're able to play with them or play in the backyard or make cookies or just be with that child and be present and have that opportunity to share the gospel with them and love on them in a way where they are feeling so torn from all they've ever known too on that day of removal day. And just assuring them that they're known, they're loved, and they're seen. Our shirts, one of our slogans is, we like to say, is love, you're not alone. And so I think that's the bottom line of every child, every caseworker, even every volunteer walking into that house, is for that mission to be lived out too.
Yeah. So amazing to think, like you mentioned, thinking from the eyes of a child and what that experience must be like. And the question I'm asking is, are you for me or against me? Because I'm not sure, right? Like, I don't know. And if you take me to an office, that's great. I mean, it's tough to get commercial real estate, so the government's doing a great job. And we, as taxpayers, I don't necessarily want to just keep giving more and more money to fund giant office spaces, right? That's a hard, so in prudence, the city and the state and the county have to say, we can tax you at such a level to provide governmental offices for law enforcement that are sufficient for them to do their job. But we're not necessarily chalking out line items that are going to make that a lavishly loving environment for kids. That's a tougher case to make to a tax base, right? To put that in a budget.
Absolutely.
But you all can come and say that we're not doing all the other things. You focus on that part.
Yes.
We're going to focus on this part.
Yeah.
And now when I come as a child into that environment and I'm asking that question, are you for me or are you against me? Because you just took me from everything I know. If you take me to that office, I'm still not sure. Like, it still feels like you might be against me because I'm alone in a corner waiting and I've been given some snacks. But if I'm baking cookies and I'm surrounded by people who love me, I start to maybe for a second feel like you're for me.
Yeah.
Right.
How many kids, Natalie, are experiencing that? You talked about the number in Hillsborough County, but when we think about removal day, how many times is removal day happening in a place like Hillsborough County?
Yeah. In Hillsborough County, between 35 and 80, there's always a range per month of children removed from their home due to neglect or abuse. In other counties in the state of Florida, I'm not sure of their exact numbers, but in our county, in that range.
35 to 80
Yes.
a month.
Yes.
Yeah. When is the house opening?
Our house for Hillsborough County. So we are currently in the building process. We were very blessed to be able to purchase land in the beginning of this year, and I can kind of get into that story if that's okay.
Yeah, I would love that.
So we, Natalie and Lisa were our expansion coordinators, and they kicked off January of 2023, and we went through a whole process of spreading awareness. They hosted a fundraiser in September, and we're able to raise money to be able to purchase land. And so we all know Tampa's market can be quite kind of difficult to find a house here these days. But it was just a time and a season where we were able to really trust and see the Lord and holding on to what He would eventually bless us with. So there is a place called McFarland Park. And Natalie's sister, Lisa, when she had one of her foster children, she brought him there to meet his now adoptive family that he lives with. And she always just felt like McFarland Park, there was something really special about it. And so in the beginning of this year, she was driving around the park and praying and everything. And this was in the process of when we had been, countlessly searching for offers. I mean, there was a house available and we were hopping in the car to go tour it and see if we could make it work kind of thing, or if it was a piece of property. And so she was driving by, and there had been a for sale sign put on an old Venezuelan church on the side of the property. And she was like, like I've never seen that there before. And so we had a wonderful volunteer realtor that had been working with us so diligently. And she went in to see how much it was listed for, and it hadn't even been put in the system yet. And so Natalie and I were able to send the realtor who was selling the property just a story about who we were, sharing our mission and our values and what we would like to purchase the land for. And we were pretty upfront on what we could offer them. We couldn't meet what they were asking for, but we just sent that letter and prayed that the Lord would move hearts if that was where it was supposed to be. And it was really cool. A year from them kicking off is when we put the offer on the property.
That's awesome.
And it was just
The exact
day.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
it was just so, like, I have chills talking about it. It was so cool to just see the Lord in that way. And I was with our general contractor there one day. We were walking around the property, and there was a lady and a husband there, and you could tell they were walking out of the church. And I started talking to them, and we had never met the pastor of the church. But basically upon talking to them, they told us that they had 3 offers on the table that they were going between, and ours was the lowest by far. We had said what we could offer, but it obviously wasn't what they were asking for. And he had said that he just was so excited for this property to be used for the kingdom. And as it had been a church and people coming in and out of it for many, many, many years, that it would be going to something for the kingdom and for the kids. It was just so cool to see, again, kind of that point of the church and the body of believers coming together and being like, no, this is a good thing. Like, I'm going to use this property for the kingdom for kids. And so that was just a really sweet story of seeing the Lord work, and also just being patient in that process too of, we knew the Lord had a place for this home. We didn't know where it was or where it was going to be, but holding out and continuously just being faithful in prayer and trusting that, God knew that this home was going to be here all along. And how cool that we get to build on a property that a church had been on for many, many years too. So
Yeah, it's so beautiful to hear you tell the story, even back to Lisa walking and going, I have a sense about McFarland Park. And we always talk about this idea of enchanted reality or an enchanted view of the world.
yeah.
And what's being said by that, that's a pre-modern way of imagining reality, is that the story is a love story, that there is a God who exists, who is deeply involved in his creation and caring for and loving for. And it's not that occasionally God is maybe going to get interested in our affairs if we do the right thing or plead or whatever, and that maybe we can get his attention.
Right.
It's the idea is, no, God's at work.
Yeah.
And when we wake up to that reality, we go, oh, we're nested within a story where God cares for the widow and the oppressed and the vulnerable. That is the heart of God. And we start to wake up to that and go, yeah, McFarland Parks, that's his. And so is that. And the whole earth is God's. And we get the privilege of stewarding it. And all of a sudden we recalibrate and start going, oh, wow, I'm participating in his story.
Yeah.
and in a story where everything is being set right and there's justice and the least of these are cared for. As soon as we start to feel like that, life charges with meaning and purpose and becomes electric. Natalie, for you, when did you know, like Isaiah 117, like God called me to this particular work? And how did you discern that? Because I'm thinking about somebody who's listening to this story and going, yeah, I've had that sense, but how did you know that this was what God was calling you to?
Yeah. Well, I've always loved the Lord. From the time that I was a little girl, I've had Jesus in my life. God in my club when I was 7, written down on a piece of paper. Who's in my club? God's in my club. And I share that because faith can be one of those things that's practiced. Step by step, by faith, I'm going to keep moving forward. And there's a verse in Revelation that talks about what God opens, man cannot shut, and what God shuts, man cannot open. And that's really the approach that Lisa, Mark, and Steve and I took early on. In order to pursue Isaiah 117 House for Hillsborough County, we had to submit a video. So my niece videoed the 4 of us explaining our heart for God and his children and why we wanted to bring an Isaiah 117 House to Tampa. That got submitted Thanksgiving 3 years ago. And from that point on, there was never a closed door. I'm not saying there haven't been hard things or potential roadblocks, but no real roadblocks. One open door after another. So that's how I knew God's put this in front of us through our experience of foster care and respite care ourselves. And he continues to open doors for us to walk through. And that's discerning God's will. And I just love God's word. God's word is my playbook for my life, and God's word is life. So by opening God's word, wherever you may be in your faith walk, we're all in different places, but by opening God's word, we can discern God's will in our life. And many times God will put things in front of us that we don't even realize, oh, is this for me? But by just taking that one step to see.
Yeah.
And, also being in prayer and prayerfully waiting, but not waiting too long. Like get in the game.
Yeah.
And like you said, then things become just electric and magical.
Yep.
And exciting.
Yeah. It's so cool to see just the way you're living your life. I have so much respect for you and Steve and admiration for how you're allowing faith to animate your embodied life and the decisions you're making with time and money and relationships and people.
Yes.
And it can look like sacrifice from the outside. We're like, oh, wow, right? You're giving up a lot. But I imagine that when you step back and think that even these neighbors that are watching this house get constructed and removal day 38 to 80 times or whatever the numbers are, that participating in that eclipses like another vacation, or we could do this, or in retirement I could go on to this, like the meaningful, impactful, like the joy that you have participating in this is far more, I would imagine.
Yes. And I think for Steve and I personally, Steve grew up with just enough. I grew up with just enough. At age 13, I'm the oldest of 3 girls. We were an all-girl home. And we all participated in jobs and contributing, and we made it. We didn't even realize that we had just enough. But Steve and I today, God's blessed us with more than enough, much more than enough. So we are excited about, as much as Jesus has done for us, giving that away and knowing that that kind of generosity, there's so much joy in that kind of generosity. And I'm hopeful and prayerful that Steve and I will be able to continue to live our life in that way and desire to live our life in that way.
I think it's what makes, when we started, we said Tampa is a very special place. Like I was not surprised, I guess, but it was wonderful to see how quickly Isaiah 117 was able to bring together the resources to
Mhm.
fully purchase the property.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I think
yes.
that's
Mhm.
a testament to we're nested within a community where
Right.
there's lots of people praying and stewarding their
Yeah.
resources like this.
Mhm.
Kayla, for you, you were in a job, you
Mhm.
master's in management, UF, prestigious school. You were able to kind of go and get into any space, I mean, to start using
Mhm.
what you had learned. And this opportunity comes. Why did you say yes to Isaiah 117?
Yeah. So just a little backstory. And you had mentioned earlier, my heart for kids, I know specifically started in helping found that nonprofit. It's called Out of Zion, and it basically brings creative arts opportunities to children with medical and special needs in the Tampa Bay area. And I feel like that's where the Lord really burdened me for kids who were suffering. And I don't say that lightly in a sense. I knew that's where like the Lord really placed on my heart. I really wanted to work with kids in some capacity, but I just never knew what that looked like or how to really pursue that. So I had done that, and then that was the summer before I left for school and was still a little bit involved in that process of helping to build that nonprofit, but that kind of got set aside once I was really in the heart of, going to Florida and everything and school and pursuing. And, when you're in school, it's, kind of like you have so many voices coming at you where it's like, oh, you're going to go do this or you're going to do that or you're going to climb this ladder kind of thing. And it really, for me personally, I always knew God had on my heart that I wanted to work with kids. And then, you start thinking, you're like, oh, well, if I want to work with kids, maybe I'll go be a teacher. And I just knew that wasn't my calling. So upon graduation, I was blessed to be able to get a job. It was great. I gained so much experience and knowledge in the work world and force. And it was just a great experience. But I kept knowing in my heart that the Lord was like prompting me to specifically just pray like what he wanted me to do with my life. I feel like growing up, we're told to use your gifts and talents to glorify the Lord. And that was really instilled and drilled into me as a child. And it's something that just has stuck with me for a while. But about 2 years ago, I really started praying like, Lord, like, what do you want me to do? I have countless journals and prayers of me just specifically going to pray and write out what I like felt like the Lord was putting on my heart. And every time I went to pray, I like felt the Lord saying like, I want you to work with kids who are suffering. And I just never knew what that looked like. I, applied to different jobs and just nothing was coming up. And it was, when you're in that like waiting season of like, Lord, like, I know you want me to do something. I just don't know what it is. And I'm trying hard to be patient. And he just kind of answered that as like, keep praying, like keep holding on. And I had a lot of people surrounding me in life, encouraging me and pushing me. And one day I had gotten this job description from a friend and she sent it to me and I kind of just like put it aside. I was like, oh, okay, like that sounds great kind of thing. Like, sounds good. And later that day, I got a call from a friend that they were doing a youth missions weekend. And they were like, hey, like, no one's coming to our lemonade stand. Can you just come stop by? And I was like, sure. So I go stop by and I asked the girls, I was like, oh, like, what are you raising money for? And they're like, oh, Isaiah 117. I was like, oh, weird. I just was sent a job description from that this morning. Maybe I should go back and like reread through that kind of thing. Guys, I kind of just like pushed it to the side. But it was just a cool, like the Lord kind of like putting it right in front of me, like, hey, like I'm right here kind of thing. Like you've been praying, like look into this a little more. And it was just a really cool opportunity. I didn't really know a lot about the foster care system until about a year ago, but it was really just a push for me personally too, to just say yes to something that I knew the Lord had been putting on my heart for so long, and saying yes and being able to walk and grow and learn all of these things and have a burden and a heart. I feel like I've always had this burden for Tampa specifically too, but now these like kids in this community, and there are kids here too. I feel like every one of us, as followers of Christ, should have a burden for our kids in this community too. And so that's kind of how I came to Isaiah 117.
Yeah. So first, we could have a 17-hour podcast. Riley's not going to let me do it. But this is what's so cool about getting time like this, because we hear something inspiring, like I did, the Isaiah 117 house. I had never heard of it before. Now I was aware of it. I heard the story and was like, wow, this is a great solution, great collaboration, incredibly important and urgent problem. So all that was really exciting. But for me, in my brain, I'm like, I want to know the story of where God's at work in this, because it comes through real people and human, like these things are happening out here, but really it's somebody who graduated from UF and thought, I don't know what it is, but it's kids. There's something going to happen. And there's people who are praying for the right person to fill that role. And God is at work in all this. So quick, just to everybody listening, like, again, the story is very much alive, and you may be praying and going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. But there's something with kids. I think Frederick Buechner said it in my most favorite way. He said, find that thing where your great joy intersects with the world's great need. And right in there is something that God's called you to. He's made you for that thing. And so kids who are suffering, and right here in Hillsborough County, times 80 per month, there's removal day happening. There's something there. And God had already been at work in you and Lisa and Rhonda. And that's the way the story works. So that's true in Seattle and San Diego and Chicago and Wyoming. And that's what it gets. And so I love your story of saying, I prayed. I didn't know the answer, but I prayed. And I paid attention to this stirring.
Yeah. And I feel like even just, from conversations too, the verse that comes to mind is Ephesians 3:20, where it says, for the Lord's able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. And he's just done that in Isaiah 117 from Tennessee all the way down to Hillsborough County, being able to purchase land in both our personal lives and I'm sure yours too, of like the Lord's going to do immeasurably more if you just pray and ask and like continuously like seek him in that too.
Yeah. And then you'll end up with a just city, and a beautiful city, and a good place. And that's true for Tampa. It's true for all of these places where God's at work. So I know we got to be careful with your time. Here's what I want to get to, because you're in the building phase for this project. We know the need is great. And we know that specifically we're thinking about Hillsborough County, but somebody listening right now might just be thinking, I don't know why I stumbled upon this, but foster care has been on my heart and mind. So before I talk specifically about Hillsborough County, Natalie, for that person who's kind of where you were a few years ago, praying and thinking about, I've heard respite care and I've heard that term, maybe it's come up in my church or I've heard it in a school setting and I've felt pulled to it. What would you say to that person who's considered helping in this space but doesn't know what to do right now? What step can they take to explore this?
Sure. Well, there are many, many steps that are available. I would say ask questions about your own community and who's fostering already in your community. Find those families, and there's ways to get involved. There's something called care teams where you can expose yourself in small ways, small steps towards serving. It might be making a meal for that family or giving the family a break on a Saturday and taking their foster son to a baseball game or the park or the zoo. There's small little things along the way in terms of participating on a care team, or you may have a family member or a close neighbor or a close friend who is fostering, and you want to pursue respite care, which is what Steve and I did. And that is just a simple way of getting a background check, a fingerprinted, and formally able to care for those children, to give that family a break, a weekend, a vacation, where the children come and stay in your home. So those are some of the small baby steps towards helping in foster care.
Yeah, I love that. We talk about the embodied gospel all the time. And this is what it looks like, of saying, ask the question, what does it look like for kids in my city? How are kids cared for in my city?
Yes.
How are the incarcerated cared for? How are the least of these among us cared for? And then you say, well, that thing that gives me great joy, that burden that's on my heart, keep pursuing it. And it may just be respite care, and that's what you can do now. It may be opening up your home. It may be adoption. But this is like, I think you said it, these are our kids. And the more we think like that, the more we begin to be in alignment with what God is doing in the world. And I love that. Let's talk about Hillsborough County in this process for Isaiah 117 house here in Hillsborough County. You're in the build phase. What does that mean specifically? And do you have what you need to complete the build phase, or are you raising the money for the build?
Yeah, so we've been blessed. Our general contractor, he's volunteered his time and services. His name is Craig Lamberson, and he works for Delato here. And he has just taken the charge and said, I'm going to help you build this house. And we've had a lot of other wonderful people come alongside us, John Keener of Keener Architecture. And we've been really in those plans of developing the plans. We're about to submit for permitting to the city. And so specifically, that's our biggest prayer request right now, is that the city would move those plans along quickly so that we could get started with that build. Our goal and our hope is that we would be able to have groundbreaking by October 1st.
Oh, wow.
That's our prayer right now, and what we're hopefully going to push for. But just to backtrack a little bit, we hosted a contractors breakfast back in April, and we just invited the construction community to come together and again, just share our story and open their eyes to what's happening in their community and if they would want to be involved or not. And we've been able to have a really blessed response from that. But there's obviously still gaps and holes and everything. So we, are always open if someone has gifts and abilities and talents in that capacity of construction. We would love to talk to them too. You can reach out to us at Hillsborough County or Hillsborough, Florida at Isaiah117house.com. And we can get you connected and information about that too.
Yeah. So breaking ground in October. God willing, pray for favor with the city, the permitting thing. There's always that needs to be done. Then you'll break ground and you'll start to build.
Yes.
And Natalie, I know that there's probably a capital cost, like the cost of construction. And one of the things I love about Isaiah 117 that intersects with V3 so much is just beauty. And that this home's going to be a beautiful place. It's not just a pragmatic, functional place. It's beautiful.
It is.
So there's a capital raise to do this at a certain quality to lavishly love these kids. And there's a budget to maintain and sustain the operations.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Isaiah 117 model and what that need looks like for Tampa, specifically Hillsborough County?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to thank our community, our Tampa community, for your radical generosity as it has helped us raise the funds, like Kayla said earlier, to purchase the land. And just the ongoing support is so important and critical in this build. Craig Lamberson, our volunteer GC, he's volunteering all of his time. He's the president and CEO of Delato Builders. And we also have a team, a build team, who everyone on the team, John Keener is our architect. They're working relentlessly to get these plans complete and submitted for permitting. And then our ongoing needs, our goal and Craig's goal is that we will build this home all materials and labor as a gift. So the home would be built at no cost.
Wow.
There will be surprises along the way. If you've ever been a part of construction or a new build, we all know it costs a lot more than we anticipate. So ongoing donations are important to help us finish the build. And then our operating budget every year to operate and maintain the home is approximately $200,000. So Kayla may talk about this. We're having an upcoming golf event at Top Golf in St. Pete on Sunday, September 29th. If you're listening to this and you live in Tampa or Pinellas County, Hillsborough or Pinellas County, you are invited. That's Sunday, September 29th at Top Golf in St. Pete. And we are doing that event to thank our donors, build awareness, and continue to raise funds to support our home and the operation of our home.
That's incredible. I love the idea of that build team and just the faith and the passion for those contractors and architects to say, let's do this and we can do this and build this as a gift.
Yes.
That, again, brilliant. Love this. And such a cool story and testament to the way people just go, these are my 5 loaves and 2 fish, right? I don't have everything, but I have these 5 loaves and these
Yes.
2 fish, and I'll bring that, and somehow a house appears.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
one of my convictions, you don't have to say this, but one of my convictions is I am stunned by someone of your caliber and faith at this point in your career saying, I'm going to dive in and give my highest and best to this work. And the other thing that I'm passionate about, I wish we could point to every cause that's as impactful as Isaiah 117, but what I'm passionate about is let's do these things and let's do them well. And it requires talent and people who have a calling and a gifting that can be applied in this space. And my prayer is that you'd be able to also have a home in Tampa. And as you mentioned it's tough to live in a city like this and to have a home in a city like this. And one of my great prayers is that the people who are working on behalf of the most vulnerable could be here walking the streets and living in the same city. And that all requires all of us participating. You got to fund a budget, and you got to fund a build, and you got to say yes from UF to come and take this job. And it just is so wonderful if we can think like that. So here's my call and my ask. I too want to celebrate what's happening in Tampa and with Isaiah 117. But everybody listening, I want you to do this and just write down Isaiah 117 and link arms with us and start praying for that process, the build process that's going to kick off in October, the construction phase that's going to bring this to completion, and the funding for Isaiah 117 so that you guys can have 10 years of your budget laid out and just know that you're good and you can scale up the team as you need to. And then I want to ask you to pray for all of the partners that you're working with. And I know we've got to be careful on time, but would one of you just really quickly sketch out for us who all is involved? Because you're playing this particular part for providing the house on removal day. But you mentioned CPI. A lot of people don't know what CPI stands for.
Yeah.
But you have Sheriff's Office, you have CPI, you have Isaiah 117 staff. Just kind of build out that full circle and down to the families like Mark and Lisa who are providing this and the volunteers.
Yeah, I can kind of go at that bigger level too. So CPI stands for Child Protective Investigators, and those are those first people that are going into the homes and removing the children. So that's who we are mainly partnering with too. And that is through Department of Children and Families, DCF. And so Samantha Taylor, she is the director of the CPIs, and we've been able to just build such an incredible friendship, and she's so supportive of this, and her support means the world to us because those are the people that we're building this home for. We're building this home for kids on removal day. And those CPIs that are coming to our home, we right now, once a month, we go and love on the CPI office and then the agencies that are under Children's Network, who's also another partner with us. And we just want to remind them like, hey, like, thank you for your work. Like, you're not alone. Like, we appreciate you. We see you. And so that's one of our biggest relationships right there is that CPI office and those agencies, and coming alongside them, walking alongside them, forming those relationships with them to build that trust too, that they can come and walk through our doors with a child and know that, hey, like, what's your favorite creamer? Like, what can I get for you kind of thing, and help serve them too. So we're partnering with, that's our main partner is CPI, DCF, and those agencies. And then we also have been partnering with churches and schools locally in Hillsborough County. We have 9 church partners and then a few school partners too. And it's been really sweet to even specifically with the school partners. I'll share a quick little story. But we've been partnering with St. Mary's first grade class this whole year. And so they made duffel bags for us. They filled them with little hygiene products, and we were able to bring them to agencies for caseworkers to give to kids that they could have a hygiene bag to go with them to a home and everything. And they've just done lots of cool things for us throughout the year. But one little boy, it was really sweet. He decided he wanted to host a lemonade stand for us. And so he hosted a lemonade stand for us on Gasparilla weekend. And he was so excited. He got the whole thing set up. And it was cool because in a way, we get to see kids helping kids, and
Sure.
he sees a need. And obviously, like, talking to kids about removal day and foster care, we have to kind of come down to their level of explaining it too. But it was really cool to see his heart in coming to his parents. Like, I want to help Isaiah 117. Like, I want to help the kids in my community that don't have the life that I have. And so that's just been a really sweet partnership to see kids walking alongside and being like, hey, I want to help too. Which kind of leads me into, we host we do like a lemonade stand challenge weekend, and it's more of just a awareness booth.
Sure.
Just spreading awareness, like, hey, like, this is who we are. We're here to help fill in that gap of removal day. This is who Isaiah 117 is. And so kind of circling back to our partners, yeah, we've been really just blessed in Hillsborough County to be surrounded by such great support too. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, for everybody who's listening to that call to pray for Isaiah 117, the permitting, the building, the construction, but then DCF and CPI and all the volunteers that are helping. Let's just surround this work in prayer. And I always say Riley loves this because Riley's a good sports fan, but we've had Tom Brady. We have a Lightning team that's phenomenal. We have the Bucks that we love, and Mike Edwards, and all these incredible people in Tampa that we just get to cheer for and celebrate. And I really am excited that people know Kayla Bain, and that really, when you think about what makes a great city, what makes a place that you can look to and say, man, that is a story to tell. It's an honor to know you. And I would just ask people, pray for Kayla and her work. And both of you and the whole team at Isaiah 117, thank you for just embodying the life and beauty of the gospel. That's what it looks like. And I love that love widens out, and what God's love does is just widen us out and open us up. And that's the story from praying in this little seed in a video that you and Mark and Steve made. And now there's contractors and pastors, and it just... That's the story. So thank you for what you're doing. If people do want to give or volunteer or reach out and just say, hey, something you said inspired me to ask a question, how can people contact you?
Yeah, so we are on social media. You can follow us on Instagram at Hillsborough County, Florida, Isaiah 117 House, or you can contact us through email, which is Hillsborough, Florida, FL at Isaiah117house.com too.
Okay. And if somebody listens to this in another state, I know that there's 28 homes, there's others that are being built out, but if somebody says, I wonder if there's an Isaiah 117 in my area, where do people go for that? Just to start getting to know you and what might be possible in their part of the world.
Yeah, for sure. So you could just go to our general website, which is Isaiah117house.com, and you can go and see all of the different locations that we have throughout the across America.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Natalie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out and spending extra time. Kayla, thank you for your work. We're just deeply grateful, and we're all going to be praying for you. So keep us posted. Maybe we'll have to have a second episode and do one at the house. That would blow my mind.
That would be amazing.
I would love that.
Riley, I'm always throwing things at Riley. He's like, okay, here we go. All right. Well,
Sounds great,
both
Doug.
so
Thank
much.
you so much.
We're grateful for you.
Thank you so much.